Ours has been a century of blood and terror. And yet of all the convulsions of our time, the one we heeded least was the revolution in bloodiest and most terrible of all. Entire civilization blown apart. Rejoices as in 1945 the Japanese surrender, the guns they hope forever stilled. To sign the document of surrender aboard the Missouri, the Allies invite Japan's first victim, China. In their eyes, China's only spokesman is Chiang Kai-shek, who sends nationalist generals to represent his people. The communists are absent. For Chinese, this is but the curtain to an act, the climax yet to come in clash with communists. Prospect, General Patrick Hurley, now named ambassador, flies off to Yan'an. He urges Mao, the war is over, let there be peace. Let Mao and Jiang divide the country politically, but unify both rival armies under a central government. America will underwrite the deal. Hurley puts a plane at Mao's disposal to explore the proposition in Chongqing. Thus, Mao arrives on the first plane flight he has ever taken. His safety guaranteed by Americans, this is his first face-to-face contact with the Kuomintang since the killings and uprisings of 1927. 6 weeks of negotiation will produce apparent agreement, as Jiang plays host to Mao before departure. The plans that lurk behind their smiles, however, deceive all Western eyes. For in the field, a race is on. Across the land, the broken Japanese must sign defeat, yield cities, garrisons, and guns. But which Chinese will take the guns and occupy the cities, communist or nationalist? The nationalists, with all the transport of America at their disposal, emplane their troops to seize the cities of the Yangtze Valley. This ease of movement will lead them on to larger appetite, dispersion of their forces up from the Yangtze to seize the cities not only of North China, but beyond. Manchuria with its vital industry and rails. Nor will the communists sit still. Together, Mao and Zhu, like Jiang, decide the key lies in Manchuria. They choose Lin Biao as field commander to make the dash. From Yan'an and North China, they will strike east and north, while Jiang is readying troops to move from Yangtze ports and airfields. By foot and pack train, Lin Biao sets out. The Russians have temporarily occupied Manchuria by the surrender terms with Japan. Communists expect to get from Russians surrendered Japanese equipment and guns and hold the countryside before Jiang arrives. The rumble of inevitable clash causes America to replace Hurley with General George Marshall. This architect of global victory is sent to save the peace for which so brilliantly he labored. Received by Chiang Kai-shek, Marshall gropes for American solution to the bitter revolutionary surges of a strange Asian nation torn by barbarisms a generation old. To his Chongqing headquarters, he invites a communist delegation led by Zhou Enlai, chief communist negotiator, to meet with Chiang Kai-shek's spokesman. Marshall suggests, and they agree to, an American answer for China's groping search for order. A federal government peacefully permitting the two parties to govern provinces they now hold politically. Freedom of speech permitted everywhere, and disputes resolved by talk, not guns. In January 1946, both parties celebrate a truce with a handshake. No paper truce, however, can mend a nation ripped apart by 50 years of killing. Within 2 months, troops are on the move again. Each side blames the other, but 100 savage skirmishes now flare to full-scale war. Manchuria is the cockpit of the struggle. The industry Japan has built and left is the greatest prize in China. Jiang's American-equipped troops seize all major cities to find a hollow triumph. The Russian occupiers have looted every factory before withdrawal. Ripped out sockets show where great machines once stood. For Mao, the fighting in Manchuria is prelude to the climax of his theories. The day when guerrilla bands group into formal armies and shove frontal combat at a weary enemy. He fights for more than safety now. His ambition seeks to mold all China to his theories. In summer 46, Jiang returns his government to Nanking, and once again, as 17 years before, reports the victory of his cause at Sun Yat-sen's mausoleum. The fighting in the north is only distant thunder in the Yangtze Valley. American advisors urge he seize this moment to win the hearts and firm the loyalties of his people by new reforms. Thus, in Nanking, Jiang convenes a Congress to write a modern constitution, in one last try to govern China by the order Sun Yat-sen has preached. But the thrust of all his background is still military. His troops must win by force of arms. With American arms, he feels the communists can be crushed, but his troops dig in to garrison rail junctions, cities they have occupied. American advisors insist such static defense is major error. They say he pins down his best divisions where communist guerrillas will isolate them. Queen city of Jiang's victorious China is Shanghai, restored at last to Chinese rule, all foreigners' concessions wiped out. While battle flares in the northern provinces, Shanghai seems to thrive. The long war's dislocation has filled the streets with hungry refugees and homeless laborers, who offer muscle energy for little more than rice to feed them. But after 50 years of suffering, such sights are almost normal. Who lost China to the Reds, ignorant men will someday ask. But now in 1948, sorrow scrawls its signature clear. Too many years of death and flight, too many dreams betrayed. In 50 years of barbarism, a gangrene of the spirit has set in, erasing pride and will and hope. Peace, whisper the communists to weary minds. Peace. An end to roaming. Now submit. Peace, they say, accept our mastery. And peace. Land, they say to landless peasants, refugees. Join us, they promise, and the land will be divided. All through North China slip their cadres, calling meetings to share out the landlord's fields. In summer 1948, Mao makes his master move. Assault by frontal armies in Manchuria. Guerrilla bands emerge from hiding, form up in full divisions, equipped with captured tanks, artillery, and guns. Jiang's garrisons are isolated by ruptured railways, hostile peasants. November 1948, Manchuria falls. Panic begins among the cut-off nationalist garrisons in North China. Surrendering by scores, then thousands, then full divisions, the equipment America has given them falls to the Reds. To America, her second homeland, flies Madame Chiang Kai-shek in November 48 to make a last appeal for further help. But Harry Truman has had enough. Reluctantly, he tells her American involvement must end. And now the Nationalists, pursued by wrath, as they in years gone by did once pursue the Communists, gather at Suzhou, last bastion guarding access to the mighty Yangtze Valley. For 2 full months, Jiang's troops fight on. In January, cut off, they must surrender. 500,000 soldiers lost. The Communists pour south. His spirit heavy burdened, Jiang resigns his leadership, hoping other men may court the Communists for better terms. On April 1st, the Nationalists send emissaries to Peking to plead with Mao Zedong. But they have passed the point of no return. No mercy, say the Communists. The new mandate of heaven requires all Nationalists to lay down arms within 3 weeks. 3 weeks later to the day, the communists uncoil to cross the Yangtze. First target is Nanking, the hallowed capital of the Kuomintang. But in that capital, the will to fight has turned to dust. No man will stand the ramparts. Abandoning positions, troops trudge away as silent people stand and watch. Too many warring armies have passed this desolate way to make them want to fight for any faith or any politics. No mainland refuge now remains, and fleeing nationalists embark what troops they can to cross the ocean for the island of Formosa. Shanghai hears the message clearly as foreign businessmen board up their shops. Go now, go quickly, for communism marches. Take what you can, but flee. In pell-mell haste, the Western powers evacuate the city they have built, for good and bad alike must leave. The businessmen come for profit, as well as missionaries come to heal, must say goodbye, as out the Yangtze steams the last of Western influence, and farewell to a century. May 27, 1949. Down Shanghai's princely avenues, the pleasure boulevards of yesteryear, rolls the victorious red tide. In 6 more months, all China will submit. Red Star triumphant, hoisted over the world's most ancient nation. Silently, the crowds observe their newest conquerors. Such border barricades have separated not only bodies, but minds. Straining to hear, Westerners have tried to filter from escaping refugees and floating rumors the story of Mao's China. Despite a still continuing inner turmoil, nothing has shaken Mao's leadership. Adored as all but God, his triumphant revolution began by teaching that in America lay the world's arch evil. We are small militiamen, fighting U.S. imperialism. Uncle, we must grow up quick to liberate Taiwan. Taiwan became America's great Asian counterbase, and our ally Chiang Kai-shek was equipped to halt the tide of Asian communism. Time would sorely test this hope. Behind the walls of mainland China, the revolution struggled to find its way. In 1958, the Great Leap Forward crippled China's economy. In 1961, famine ravaged the land. In 1964, they kindled this atomic bomb. Then came missiles. But every revolution builds a new bureaucracy. So too, behind their walls, did Chinese communists. Such bureaucracies mean power, and for this power men struggle, in China as in the West. In 1965 came Mao's last great crisis. His shadow, Liu Shaoji, companion in revolution for 50 years, handpicked as president by Mao himself, challenged Mao for control of the bureaucracy. Then followed the years of the Great Cultural Revolution. All universities were closed. Students dispersed to roam the country and root out Liu's bureaucrats in Mao's name. From student riots to bloodshed to full-scale battles in the cities. Until Mao ordered into action the Red Army under its commander Lin Biao. In 1968, an official document names Lin, quote, Comrade Mao's close comrade-in-arms and successor, unquote. By 1969, Liu had disappeared, Mao's supremacy restored. A short-lived triumvirate governed China. By the close of 1971, Zhou Enlai, Premier and Foreign Minister, seemed closest second to Mao in leadership.
In April 1971, the first official American visitors in 20 years come to Peking to play a game. This is not, however, a game only for table stakes. A much larger game is involved as dialogue between the world's two great powers resumes.
We have a saying in the United States, too. Good friends can be found anywhere, and we welcome them to our country.
In 1945, Joe had asked that he and Mao Zedong be allowed to fly to America and present their case about the Chinese Civil War to President Harry Truman in Washington. They had been rebuffed. America's president did travel to meet Joe.
Good evening. I have requested this television time tonight to announce a major development in our efforts to build a lasting peace in the world. As I have pointed out on a number of occasions over the past 3 years, there can be no stable and enduring peace without the participation of the People's Republic of China and its 750 million people.
Slowly, the sharp-cut silhouettes of black and white by which the Western view of China has been shaped, the images of good and bad, have melted into vivid, changing colors. Bicycles now crowd the streets of Peking, an indicator of clearly better times for ordinary Chinese. From wallboard bulletins like these, called Dazibao, Peking gets its freshest news, along with thought and doctrine from Mao Zedong. China's industry grows. From less than 2 million tons of steel capacity at the time of the communist takeover, China, it is said, now produces 8 times as much. In the fields, where 80% of all Chinese still work the soil, they share in communes, the land that communism promised them. Students are back in colleges, reopened after 5 years upheaval, but enrollments have been slashed. Here at Peking University, the roster has been cut from 9,000 to 2,600. Screened for political background and reliability, such students march no more to riots. To talk to such people is difficult, but translation itself betrays ideas with words. Example, we say individualism. In Chinese translation, it comes out Koranjui, which means every man for himself. Or our hallowed word liberty. In Chinese translation, it reads ziyo, meaning self-will, with a connotation of reckless willfulness or license. Such ideas are alien to Mao. The ancestors of these children first invented, then gave the world paper, printing, books, gunpowder, the clock, the compass. Their pride in this past, broken for so long, has been restored. Seated in the United Nations, accepted in their power, the parents of these children are no longer passive objects of foreign will. They act henceforward for themselves, and this they teach their children. It does no good to mourn the past, or try to wave the blame both on theirs, what's between us. We pass along a road of time, which always turning, never brings us back to the crossroads marked again. It was history, as we've seen, that shaped the mind of China to accept Mao's new order, just as history has shaped our mind in other ways. And we live within these forces of history, knowing now that neither bombs nor bluster can force such minds to change. It must come otherwise. So we are launched on a long road to reach the mind of China and persuade it that peace serves both our interests.